Thank you, folks. Wow. Please, it gives me great pleasure to welcome the director of the film, Jake Paltrow. Jake, thank you so much for being here. We have a microphone for you, don't worry.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you for being here. I have so many questions, and I want to leave time also for their audience to ask questions. I'm going to start by asking, why was it important for you to tell this story?
I mean, the process with some of these movies is a bit like a relationship, like falling in love a bit. So I didn't set out to make a movie in Israel, or certainly didn't set out to make something in Hebrew, but I was grabbed by the detail of the one-time use crematorium was the sort of element that I felt, let's dig a little deeper into this. It was mentioned as a footnote in something else that I was sort of interested in, and followed that. And ended up going to Israel to speak to some of the living participants in the story, and we came across this man, the real version of David, who made this claim, and the other people at the factory were saying he didn't work there. And we interviewed him, and at one point we did on film, and I thought maybe at one point we would use it in the movie, something sort of cut between sort of reality and the thing, but it didn't become that, and I felt maybe telling. When you think about this subject matter and testimony, and then think of personal testimony and how that relates me to some things that we have encountered today, I found it interesting that that this character, or the man in reality, that his was refuted so strongly, and I thought it would be interesting to tell the movie from his point of view as if what he was telling me was true. So it didn't matter so much what I believed, but I liked it as an idea of telling the story from his point of view.
It's fascinating. One of the things I love about this film is it's beautifully produced, beautifully directed. The cinema there is extremely strong, and it's Eichmann obviously has its historical importance and significance, and is especially for every Israeli. We know that it's a crucial moment in history. But Eichmann in this movie is, I'll call it a MacGuffin. It's not important even to the film.
Yes. The thinking there with Tom Cheval, who I wrote the movie with, who's a great filmmaker, if you've seen any of his movies, one of the things we talked about was to even toe into it a bit, to kind of make a character out of him, even if we got it right. Where's that really going to get us now? There's something about it that just feels, there have been many, many things about him, and and done, in a focused way about, his own history. And to me, I saw it as, whatever the opposite of like a hearth is, whatever the cold version, something that everybody has to kind of gather around, and you have to make this sort of community out of something. And we were very interested in that, this idea that he's much more of this figure, or even a concept that you're sort of reacting to, than a fully, embodied character, no matter who you cast to do it.
Yeah, and we've seen the films. His story has been told. Thank you.
Right.
Done. And to give us the story of the people that it's around it, and with such richness, is really what drives this. And it's richness that goes like both within the storytelling. I think it's in the writing. I think it's in the directing. I think it's also in the production. How did you? I'm somebody who I've seen the majority of Israeli films, I'd say, and know the history well enough, and find that you managed to capture the 1960s of Israel. I assume you were not there. I was not there.
No.
But in an authentic way. How did you manage to really create this reality there?
I mean, Eitan Levy, our production designer, was. Eitan is in his mid-70s and knows everything, and also David Silber, who produced the movie. So you have people to help you in terms of the authenticity. So in particular, the magazine, which is based on a magazine there called Ha'olam Hazeh, which was quite radical at the time. Getting those pages and kind of getting it right, and also kind of figuring out. So Yuri Avneri, who is this sort of radical, this sort of first firebrand politician there. That was his magazine. So he's sort of based on that journalist, and I had a lot of help. I had great collaborators. I had, of course, what I had in my mind, trying to meet that in the reality of present day Israel. Very difficult. It's not I mean, even parts of New York would be much easier to do those periods. Everything, I mean, since we've made the film, the location where the factory is torn down, the prison, I think, is now a mall. I mean, everything has been renovated, so very hard to do anything more than half a block or so. All, you know, we've digitally removed all the air conditioners in places where they might pop up, and but I don't. I think just from a directorial thing, you know, you have a feeling of what it should kind of be like enough. So I don't, put it all. It's not like a big lookbook kind of thing. We're not trying to match stuff, but you get a sense of it as you're going along and having people like David and Eitan, sort of who know it, who lived it all. It just happens kind of naturally, I think. Also, shooting on film, of course, is a great help.
And I was going to say the color palette,
Yes, yes.
and it really both, I feel, references Israeli films of the past
Sure.
and captures a color. Israel, I mean, that scene at the end actually gives you the contrast. Israel of today is blue.
Right.
It is a very
And
different.
traffic.
Israel of the past is that yellow that we saw there. That is.
Yeah. And the cinema too, which is not as well known probably as it should be. We're referencing, I think, some great films there too.
Absolutely, and especially having that kid's perspective. There was something, for some reason, the stories of the 1950s in Israel, 50s and 60s, have been captured often with these characters that, I mean, he fits into it perfectly.
Yeah, Noam's great, yeah.
It's really beautifully done. I'll ask one more question, then we'll take some questions from the audience, because I would love to make you a part of this conversation, and I have many more to ask if you don't want to be a part of this conversation. The film itself, actually, my big question is that the question that you really bring up at the end. This question of who gets remembered in Wikipedia or not, is that what is that how we are remembered? Is that how we have our legacy? Is that what matters? Why is that a topic that you wanted to explore, and how do you resolve it?
I think it's not resolved, and I think that's sort of something that Tom and I talked about a lot. And the writing of it is it's ending a bit more in a question, because that is how history is sort of ratified now. Whoever controls that Wikipedia page, and we can of course extend that across lots of other things. But I think as that applies to the Holocaust and other histories that are so important and so forensically analyzed and cataloged, and Micha, the character in Poland, is based on Mickey Goldman, who's still with us at 97. Who we were running kind of everything by in this, and that's very much his view in terms of justice as you look at it, because of course there's no way to really serve it from his point of view in any way at all, except to lay it out, in that sort of order. So he doesn't mean necessarily law and order, but I think he means literally the taxonomy of, those kinds of horrors is all you can really do to meet it. That's done. The way it's done when you watch Gideon Hausner, or you watch any of that trial or anything, it is done, by human beings face to face with words. Now these things are done on the computer. So whatever that will be moving forward.
Well, I have to say, it really brings up a fascinating. I remember when I first the film premiered at the Jerusalem Film Festival, and I had read about the film before that, and I was like, oh, why do we need another Eichmann film, which of course I assumed it was. And I was so happy to see that this wasn't an Eichmann film, and to really be about that question of what makes something true or not, what makes something a part of history or not, I think is much more fascinating in today's world, and something that we need to explore a little bit more. And I thank you for exploring that question a little bit. I'm sorry that you don't have an answer to it, but
I would love to have an answer.
Folks, we'd love to take your questions here. We're going to give you a microphone.
So I was living in Jerusalem at the Hebrew University from 61 to 65. So the Eichmann trial and Eichmann were a huge part of that time. What I missed in your film was Israelis, and that included me at the time, every hour on the time would turn on the news. 1, 2, 3. And Eichmann was in the news all the time. All the time. So it was in our consciousness because we listen to the news all the time. I had the opportunity at the end to go to his trial at the end, and I chose not to do it. But thank you for the film.
Thanks. I can just respond to. I think when we talked about this to try to give a sense of what the trial was like, I think we felt that the trial had been very well covered in other things. So essentially, the movie starts on the last day of the trial. So that last time that they're listening to it in the classrooms, or what Micha references in Poland, where he says, it was in every school and on every bus, and so he's talking about a bit in hindsight. But yes, maybe we could have done.
And by the way, I felt that the presence is there. I think, you feel that in the back, if it's, from the front page of the newspaper or whatever it is, or from the reporters just being there, that there's this, that this is what people are talking about.
First of all, congratulations. It was a great film.
Thank you.
My question to you is, since you interviewed him, or actually he was the main character, what does he do today for a profession, or what did he do after?
Oh, I have a list of all the jobs that David did, and you couldn't make it up. I mean, it's so varied. I'll tell you one small thing that he had told us is that what he found out later on, he ended up in computers, was his main line of work, programming, I guess, which started in the 70s, very early into computers. And he found out much later on that his mother had gone to the people at the computer place and had talked to them about hiring him, and had really urged them, almost to the point of maybe you could help me out here. And so, he had had a tough relationship with his father. He had communicated, and so when he told us that, he was so moved by it when he finally found out, but that he ended up in computers the whole time. But after this, he did every single job you could possibly imagine, and we have it all transcribed, and it's amazing.
Can you tell us how you built the stove, or whatever you want to call it?
Yes,
and how
right.
it worked?
The
I was
oven.
Just fascinated.
Did it really work?
Oh yes, that was what we say. We would say through the whole preparation of the movie, if we don't have a boy and we don't have an oven, we'll have no movie. And so Noam, who plays David, had never acted before. He wasn't an actor. And so that was kind of a process of, he is an actor, of course, because you watch him and you can see he's very good. But he hadn't done it before. And so the man who played the teacher is also a great acting teacher. And he and Noam started to develop, a method of working together. Noam at the time didn't really speak much English. So that was that part. Then the oven, I really wanted it to be practical, that it would work exactly, that it could be something we could bring onto the set and turn it on, and it would be a spectacle kind of its own. And my fear was that if we left certain elements to be decided later, a lot of it will be, in the computer-generated imagery of flames and things. They just don't often look very real to me. And so Eitan, our production designer, and the practical special effects group were able to devise an oven that is completely practical. Yeah, they were amazing there. The people there, the technicians there are great.
Hopefully you made some pizzas afterwards too, or something else.
Yeah,
right?
it ended with the lamb joke.
So-
Yes.
I must tell you that even though the film wasn't about Eichmann, to me it was very much about Eichmann, and it brought back everything about him and about World War II and the Holocaust. I think you did a superb job. And
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means so much.
I saw one more question up there. Sorry. It's always on the other side. I'll ask in the meantime a quick question. First of all, great cast in general. Tzachi Grad, who plays the boss, he is my favorite Israeli actor. He is he's something else, and I know he's not acting. Why does he fire him at the end in your mind?
I think it's a very confused emotional state for him. I don't know if he feels these sorts of things for people very often, and I think he can't quite fully come to terms with all of it. It's that, there's a bit of it's, of course, the scorpion thing. It's in his nature to, hurt people and not necessarily have outcomes exactly the way he fully wants them to go, aside from contributing to building the country. But the real Shlomi, his story, apparently, David Ben Gurion personally blocks the real Shlomi from having, any post in the IDF as it becomes and really didn't like him personally and kind of made it a mission. And the real Shlomi went back to work for his father in Petah Tikva at this oven factory, and then was arrested in the 70s, right, a year before he died, for smuggling weapons to Italy. He had put together a sort of an operation.
Thank you very much. It was am I using this thing correctly? Yeah, okay. It was a beautiful film,
Thank you.
very, very moving. I was very struck by the particular scene where the woman from the Jewish agency speaks to the Holocaust survivor. And I was very moved by it because I think it brings up a lot of themes that I've wrestled with and themes that I remembered especially wrestling with when I was in Israel for Yom HaAtzmaut. And I was curious if you brought that conversation in that scene to sort of make a greater point, or was that a conversation that was already happening at the time? Sort of like, what was the purpose of that scene?
So a few things. When Tom Cheval and I wrote it, we thought of Ada a bit from the future, just as a dropped from almost from somewhere else. This isn't something that's really happening at that point in terms of public discourse, from my understanding, in any Broadway. I mean, it is a bit in other ways. Gershom Scholem and those people writing letters to Ben Zvi, to commute the execution and these sorts. So there were these kind of voices doing it in a different kind of way, but I think what the conversation is a conversation of sort of right versus right, conducted in this sort of dignified and emotional way. And it's very much a conversation like Tom and I would have together. Tom and I are very close friends and spend our days, as much as we're writing, we're also talking about these things and talking about our interests and talking. And of course, all of this stuff is at the center, or at least the center at the time, of everything that's on our minds. So it's very personal in one way. And at the same time, it's not exactly a scene that happened, to Mickey, but we're talking, to Mickey about all this stuff as we're writing it and as we're kind of going through it. So I think it's where the sort of movie characters, meet the writers a bit too. And not that we have an answer coming out of it, but the idea that there cannot necessarily be an outcome, but you can have sort of a right versus right, and it actually brings the two people a bit closer as people, even if there isn't a resolution to the, you start to think about it, well, if all these conflicts could, at least move the people a little bit closer together in the way that they communicate. I mean, you think about everything right now, it would be, it's more than we can hope for pretty much everywhere, here or there, or just about anywhere, I guess. But I think that's what it was. And of course, it's a subject that's on our minds. So.
Jake, I want to thank you so much for this film. Thank you for being here
Please,
and enlightening
thank you
us
all
further.
for coming. Really
Thank you all for
appreciate
being
it
a part.
so much.
Folks, this film will have a theatrical release, and we want you to spread the word about it. So please share with your friends. Thank you so much. And join us for more this week. Thank you.